Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. I'm Jay, and today we're going to begin our Skraptown terrain series with building some basic orc building. Alright, so these are the materials we're going to need for today's tutorial. Basically the tools we're going to need, a pair of clippers, like wire cutters, or in this case I use needle nose because they have this nice little clipper thing right there for clipping our popsicle sticks. So we're going to need a few popsicle sticks for this. I've just got a pile of them here. We're going to need a lot more than that, obviously. Also, we're going to need a hobby knife, of course, to cut our foam core. So for our basic building materials, we've got 5mm foam core and some corrugated cardboard. That's what we're basically going to be building these out of. We're going to build them mostly out of the foam core. The cardboard is just for decoration. So as tools, we need our clippers, we got our knife, we got a hot glue gun to be able to glue the basic skeleton of the building together, and of course the glue sticks for said glue gun. Standard white glue, crazy glue, always comes in handy. And today we're going to specifically also do some of the details with some glass beads. I scored a bunch of glass beads recently, and I figured I'd put them to use. On top of that, we've just got like a random tub of bits. 40k bits to 40k it up, and then in this I've got a bunch of little pieces of sprue and cut off pieces of plastic and resin and things like that, just to create piles of rubble and stuff on the pieces once we're done. So those are the materials we're going to use, and let's start building. So as usual, we're going to start with our foam core skeleton. Most of the buildings I build out of foam core just because it's a super easy material to build a nice frame out of. It's cheap, it's quick, it's very shapeable, of course. As I've said in past tutorials, I usually take like scraps and stuff that I have left over, cut off large pieces of foam core and turn them into weird little oval shapes like this, just for projects like this where I need terrain bases. Now for this project I'm actually going to need like a whole bunch of these, and generally I have, you know, a whole bunch extra because when I do a project and I'm left with a large piece, like I said, I make little bases like this. So it's just a simple foam core base. I beveled the edge. It's just a random oval shape, egg shape, I guess, and that's going to be the base for our terrain, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that after. But right now, we need to build your basic box. So at this point, I've already cut some strips of foam core. I'm doing a whole bunch of these buildings, of course, so I've decided to just cut a bunch of strips, and then I cut my buildings down from there. So taking my ruler here, I've decided to make my walls 3.5 inches tall. The reason for that being that in 40k, generally one story is 3 inches. That's a scale I like to keep with my terrain pieces because it's sort of the standard accepted height of a story on a 40k building. So I tend to keep with that. And it'll be usable for other 28mm games, of course, but any other post-apocalyptic thing. But of course, I'm doing these with 40k orcs in mind, and so these are 40k terrain pieces. So that basically gives me 3 inches, and then it gives me an extra ½ inch, just a little lip around the roof for guys to kind of, I guess it won't really provide much cover because it'll probably only be like knee height, but at least it creates a nice look to the terrain piece and creates a nice little rim there around the top. So what I want to do at this point is actually decide, since I have my strip, I can cut this into any lengths I want. I'm just going to decide how big I actually want the footprint of the building to be. And that's going to be dictated by the size of my template. Like I said, I just have random pieces like this sitting around a lot of the time, so this is what I start with. And so I'm not cutting the template to match the building. Obviously, if I had a more succinct plan about how I was going to do these buildings. But remember, it's orcs, right? So they don't really think things through until the very end. And most of the time they don't have to obey the laws of physics. So anyway, in this tutorial we're going to be less worried about making things square and straight and more worried about just making things structurally sound and durable so that they will last wear and tear of being used on the tabletop. So this particular piece, it might do me good to make it 3 inches there. I've got a good amount of space on either side. So going from there about this way, maybe I'll do 4, 5, maybe even 6, just because the terrain piece sticks over a bit on this edge. So yeah, we'll make the walls 6 inches. Yeah, I think that'll be fine by 3. So I'm going to come over here to my strip, and I'm just going to measure out 6 inch, 2 6-inch pieces and 2 3-inch pieces. 4 pieces, what we want to make sure to do, because we're going to put a roof on this. Now, I've decided not to do a removable roof for these particular buildings, just because the buildings are so tiny anyway. There's not really a whole lot of point in putting models inside. Plus, it'll save me having to cut windows, cut doors. What we're going to do for those is, I'll show you later, we're just going to do some art, like some facade doors and stuff that are not going to actually be able to operate as doors or windows, but they will take the place of them aesthetically. So, we have to take into consideration, to get back on topic, the roof. I decided to make these walls 3.5 inches high, and that's so that the top of the roof is exactly 3 inches off the base of the terrain piece, because like I said, that's the standard accepted measurement for 40K scale, at least 40K itself. Not necessarily all 28mm, but for 40K itself. So all I'm going to do there is I'm just going to go over the top of all these pieces and mark a 1/2 inch down, so that when I put these together, I know exactly how high to place my roof, because I'm going to have to glue basically the walls onto the roof to make this work. If I glue these 4 walls together and then try and slide the roof in, it's going to be very hard to get a good bead of glue around the edge of the roof without getting it all over the top rim of my buildings. And also, working with hot glue, it dries very quickly. Not super quickly, but quickly enough that it'll make a gigantic mess of my terrain piece. So take the extra time and go around and just mark a 1/2 inch off the top edge of each of these pieces.
Having all the fun, but I hope that you'll enjoy it. This show I put on for you, so soft you put your fingers through now.
There you go, so now we need to cut a roof. So for the roof, I've just got an extra piece of foam core here. Again, this is a large cutoff that I had left over from this exact project. Like I said, I'm building a whole bunch more of these off camera, so that is what it is. Anyway, one thing I will mention to you guys when we're figuring out the measurements for this roof, more or less the short sides, I'm going to want the long side to overlap them, right? So I've got 3 inches here and 6 inches here. If I actually make this top 3x6, by the time I go to glue them onto the roof, I'll end up getting a corner like that instead of like that. So I want the roof to be 3 inches exact this way, so that it lines up with these 2 small pieces. And then, like I said, this is 5mm foam core. So if I subtract a centimeter off of that 6 inches, it should give me enough space to be able to overlap these. I'm sorry to be using 2 different measurement systems, guys, but that's kind of the fun part about being Canadian, I guess. So let's do it.
Inside a box, well, everything's a box inside a box, inside a box.
So here I've measured out my 2 6-inch points. So before I actually draw that line, I'm going to go from each of these points and mark out exactly a centimeter in. Like I said, I'm sorry about using imperial and metric in the same system, but I like to work in imperial. I guess because I used to be a cabinet maker, I'm just used to working in imperial. But the foam core itself is 5mm, and I could convert that, but I'm going to be more accurate using the actual measurement of the sheet itself, hence the metric system. Imperial for math, metric for accuracy. And there we go. And all this requires is cutting her out. So, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this guy's been sitting in the corner of the screen the whole time, and basically that's just my hot glue gun, which I'm going to use to put all this together. So I've had it heating up the entire time I've been cutting these, just to make sure it's nice and hot and that the glue's going to perform for me properly, the way I want it to. So, like I said, we're going to have to go around and build this a piece at a time. And since I've marked these off now for where the top of my roof's going to go, that's going to make my life a lot easier. Also, because I've made this the exact same width as the roof, I want to start with these pieces, and then I'm going to build the other one on, put this one on here, and then put the final one, just to cap it off. Making sure the whole time to keep my corners square, and you just simply do that with your fingers. So, to show you guys, rather than just telling you, just put a nice fat bead along the edge of this. Make sure I line it up with my pencil line there. And make sure that my edges are flush, or at least as close to it as possible. And like I said, hot glue dries quick, but it also gives you a little bit of time to kind of move it around a little bit, especially with the foam, because the foam will melt a little bit from the heat of the glue. That's okay, because the glue pretty much fills the gap. And then just a little bit on top. We can just take our fingernail and run through. Boom. There's a little bit left on there, not a big deal. We're going to be putting a lot of stuff on top of this, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. But now, the reason we're going to put this side on rather than the other end on is because that way we can make sure to line this corner up with each other. But also make sure that our roof stays along our pencil line and that the outside corner of our 6-inch piece is going to line up with this edge here. And I just ran out of glue.
It's so meaningless.
Now remember guys, these roofs aren't going to open, so don't worry if you get a little bit of glue up underneath the roof. You want to get a minimal amount on the top.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And like I said, make sure to line up your pencil line with the top, and make sure to line up the outside corner with the outside corner of this. You can just use your fingers to kind of flush everything up and push it together at the same time while pushing with your thumb against this side. And that's actually pretty strong right there. Cool. So now we're going to start actually by putting glue on this piece. Because if I try to run a bead up here, yeah, I can do that, but it'll make kind of a bit of a mess. So I might want to run glue along this edge, and then I'm going to run glue along this edge, and that'll make it easier to put it on.
Well, we pushed her through, we pulled her along in her entire life. We made her wrong, we crushed every single dream she ever had.
There's our orc house. So, let's attach it to the base.
Misfire, mutated, so meaningless.
That's pretty much all there is to it. So now that we got the skeleton of our base, it's really, the base of our terrain piece, the skeleton of our terrain piece. The rest is all decoration. So the next step for these, before I start going crazy, putting on all kinds of armor plates and doors and details like that, I want these to look like they're made of metal, not made of concrete, or definitely not made of foam core. So I want to cover up these foam core edges the best I can. And right now, I'm going to be putting all kinds of stuff around the walls and stuff like that, so I'm not going to worry too much about the top ones. I'll show you what to do about those later. But right now, I want to cover up at least these ones along the side. So like I said, I made these walls 3.5 inches tall, and I know that. So I'm just going to take some popsicle sticks. There you go. And I'm going to measure a bunch of them at 3.5 inches long. Obviously, I want to start by cutting off the rounded edge, measure out 3.5 inches, and then just chop it again with my clippers. That's why I suggested the clippers. Again, you can use wire cutters, you can use any kind of snippy tool that is strong enough to cut these popsicle sticks. I like to use these because they give me some control, and then I can just hold the stick like that, clamp it together, and it doesn't fly all over the room, because that will happen a lot too, guys. So, like I said, it's very simple. Cut one circular end off, measure out 3.5 inches. From the 5, I'm looking at 8.5, there we go. Try and get, now, realize too that the clippers here, guys, there's kind of like a triangular part, and it will pinch together and create a nasty looking end on it, well, a squished looking end on it. And I'll show you how to avoid that in a second, but make sure that the top of your triangular blade is at the pencil line, not the edge of your clippers. We want these to be pretty much exactly 3.5 because our walls are pretty much exactly 3.5. And that's that. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of these.
Friend, and we will surely meet again now. Isn't it funny how everything works out? Isn't it beautiful, everything works out?
Alright, so you can guess why I did 8 of them. Basically there's 4 corners on this piece. But before we glue them on, I'm going to take my knife and just, now, you'll notice that you get like kind of a triangular, see if I can actually focus on that at all. You get kind of a triangular pinched end on that. Also, a lot of the time you're left with this one little splinter. Now what I do sometimes is just break it off, because we're going to want these to look like rough pieces of lumber, right? So you can just peel it like a banana peel. This guy here, I'll show you too. Just peel it back and literally rip it off. A lot of the times that'll rip a piece off the edge here, but that's okay, because we're going to be making a whole lot more of those messed up edges. But also this sort of pinched top, you can just take your knife and run sideways along it, and just to flatten it out, kind of, if you want a flat edge. On these particular corners, we're not going to see the bottom or the top edge very much, because once we're done, we're going to cap off the top edge, and of course the bottom's going to have sand and rubble and what have you, so I'm not too worried about the edges on this one, but we will also be using the popsicle sticks for windows and doors, and so I'm going to want to put more focus on the edges of those ones, obviously, because they will be seen. Also, along the edge that we're going to show exposed, I want to just take my knife and whittle a couple of pieces off the edges, just to make it look like battle damage and wear and tear, weather and such, because of course a plank of wood, especially on an orc world, is not going to be in mint, nicely planed condition. So just go around, spend some time whittling, adding some damage to these popsicle sticks, and then we'll glue them on. I will interject that you guys are watching me with very bad habits right now. I'm completely cutting towards myself, which is really the wrong way to be doing this. So for all you kids watching, if your parents have allowed you to use an X-Acto knife, don't cut towards your thumb like this, like I'm doing. If anything, actually cut away. That is the proper way to do it. That way you're less likely to cut yourself. Also, when you're whittling, I've been doing it this way. Again, bad habits, guys. Just go this way with it. It's going to turn out the same, and it's going to save your fingers, because if you cut yourself with one of these knives, trust me, I've done it so many times in my life, sometimes you actually need stitches, so be real careful. Back to whittling. Sorry to use the wrong technique there, guys, or sorry, the less safe technique. I had no intention to, it's just that you gotta realize I've been doing this for 20 years, and so I know the consequences, so be careful. Anyway, still got my hot glue gun heated up, and the whole point of doing these popsicle sticks at this stage was just so that, can I get that to balance? Yeah, screw it. Was just to cover these foam core edges, but I'm not going to just put one to cover the edge. Number one rule of cabinet making is if you can't hide it, accentuate it. So if I'm going to throw this one piece on here, I want to throw another one there, just to create sort of a beam for the corners. And I'm just going to glue it on with my hot glue like I have everything else. Obviously putting my whittled sides to the outside. Now I can go around and clean off any areas where the hot glue has squeezed out. And I can just do that with my fingernail, or I can take my knife and just kind of chip away at it. Just like this, peel it off, no problem. And I'm just going to go around. That didn't come off no problem, did it? Anyway, there you go. It does peel off relatively simply, guys, depending on how much you put on there. And again, don't worry about damaging up the foam core a bit, too, because we're going to damage it up a lot more and make it look nice and rustic. So right now, that is the basic structure of our building. Boom. Now we get to have fun making it look orky. Now that we've got our foam core building pretty much built, at least the skeleton of it, we're going to start adding some details. So, the very first detail I would like to add is armor plates, as well as some doors and windows, and the materials I'm going to use for that. Of course, I'm going to use my corrugated cardboard for all my armor plates, and I'll show you guys exactly what we're going to do there. And then I'm also got a whole bunch of popsicle sticks here. Obviously, we've used a few so far for the edges of our buildings, but we're also going to use them for the doors and the windows, just to look like random, you know, wooden boards that they've put over the doors and windows. Since we didn't actually cut holes for doors and windows in these buildings, we just want to create sort of the illusion of doors and windows. So very first thing we're going to do is we're going to start cutting up our corrugated cardboard. So I just want to, I've actually got a bunch cut here already because I've been doing a few of these buildings off screen. There you go. Just some little squares. And all that requires is just taking our knife and cutting some strips in this corrugated cardboard. And you don't have to be exact with it. Remember, this is orcs building these buildings, so they're pretty much going to be random sizes. So I just cut like a random strip there. Tried to make it as square as possible, but again, things don't have to be perfectly square. We're making this orky. So now that I've got my strip, I'm just going to take my knife and cut a bunch of random squares off it. And it's that easy. And like I say, I'm not being precise. They're not going to be all the same. They're not going to be square. They're just going to be random.
We'll see all the sights just like that show you like on HBO.
Now we make our doors and windows. So on the other buildings I've built so far, off camera, I've decided to do the doors 1.5 inches high and the windows 1 inch wide. And the reason for that is only because your standard Space Marine or Orc model is going to be just a little bit more than 1 inch high. So 1.5 inches should be able to clear, so it looks like they could go through the door, even though I'm not going to physically be able to put the model through the door because this is just a facade. It'll at least look appropriate for the scale. So I've got my ruler here. I'm just going to take my popsicle stick, line it up at the edge, and mark out 1.5 inches. And for the doors and windows, I've decided I'm going to go 3 sticks wide, just because that's the, I guess, appropriate width that I've found for the model. So I want 3 pieces at 1.5 inches for my door. And just like we did on the corners, I'm just clipping it with my clippers here. There we go. I'll just clip the circular end off this guy. Cool. I just need 1 more for my door. Excellent. And then line that up with the 0. I'm going to do 1 inch. Another 1 inch. Bam. That'll give me 2 of my 3 pieces for my window. In fact, let's give this piece 2 windows. So I want 3 pieces for the door and 6 pieces for the windows.
And they're killing music.
So now that I've got my pieces for my windows, as you can see right there, those are going to be my windows. And then this, obviously turned this way, is going to be my doors. Bam.
Rhythm, they'll make it change your world. Still it sounds like a song they know. Like it really fucking matters what you have to say. Like it matters how the story goes. As long as you all look and sound the same. They're killing the muse. And
there they are. Let's start gluing these on. The first thing I want to start with is my doors and windows, because that's going to decide where all the other ones go. Because obviously I don't want to overlap my windows. I don't want my windows to overlap my armor plates, because it's just going to screw with the depth and all that stuff. So I want to glue these on first. And all I'm going to use for that is just standard PVA glue. Nothing special. I'm just going to put a little tiny dab on the back, if I can get it to come out. And just rub it around with my finger. You don't need to be too careful with this stuff. And I've decided I'm just going to put the door directly in the middle, or at least as close to the middle of the front facing of this building as I can. Now, this PVA glue should be strong enough to hold these boards on, guys. You can use other glues if you feel that this is not good enough, but it should glue the wood perfectly fine. I mean, I've said it before in past tutorials, PVA glue literally is wood glue. They are the same thing. It's just the yellow stuff has an additional chemical that reacts with wood. But this normal PVA white glue will hold popsicle sticks together, no problem. Will hold foam core together, no problem. And so it should hold popsicle sticks to foam core, no problem. So there you go. Got my door in the middle. nice and uneven, as is the Orky way. And these guys, on the other pieces, have put the middle board of the window somewhat flush with the top of the door, and then the other two just go around it, one on top, one on the bottom. Again, nothing complicated. And again, we don't have to be precise. Again, we are talking orcs. The more ramshackly, the better, in this case. As for the random metal plates that we're putting around, I've used corrugated cardboard for a very good reason. So in this case, I'm going to put a bunch of these around just as is, but a few of them I also want to make sure that I be very careful and peel off the first layer of this, and that'll create that sort of corrugated metal look. But you will find that as you peel these, you'll get pieces of the top layer that you're trying to take off stick to the corrugated part. And I found your best results are to look at the top of it here and see where the corrugated goes. So in this case, it's going this way. And I'll peel along each individual thing one at a time. If I just peel it on a random angle, or I peel it this way, it's more likely to stick because it's held on in more than one point. Whereas this way, I'm just collapsing one point at a time. And as you can see, there's almost none left behind. And that's all we're doing. So I'm going to glue a bunch of these on with the white glue, the same way we just glued on the popsicle sticks. I'm just going to put a glob on the back of each one of these. Rub it around with my finger. That wasn't enough. There we go. Rub it around with my finger. And stick it sort of haphazardly wherever I'd like it. That's good enough space as any. I'm going to go around the entire building and just throw on a bunch of pieces.
You know,
And what you can even do, guys, once you've put a couple really close to each other, like I've done with these two here, is you can overlap one over top like this, just crossing over both of them. Yes, I put glue all over the back of that piece, but that's fine because it'll at least hold on wherever it contacts. And of course, PVA glue dries clear, so we don't have to worry so much about the appearance, but we are gonna, be putting lots of layers of paint and stuff on top of this, so no worries there. Let's just keep going.
Will he make it worth a mine? She says she's old-fashioned, no one-night stands.
So now we let the PVA glue dry, and we're going to add some extra details to these just to bring them to life. Awesome, now that our PVA glue is dry, we're going to have some fun with beads. So I've got a couple different sizes of beads here. I've got some long, sort of egg-shaped cylindrical ones, which I intend to use as sort of a hinge detail. I've got some larger glass beads that I'm going to use as the doorknobs. And then these really tiny, white, shiny ones are going to be the rivets on all of these pieces. And yes, this is going to be pretty time consuming, but it's going to look awesome when we're done with very simple materials. So let's start with the doorknob. All that is putting a dab right where I want it. So I'm going to put it on the short side of this door, I suppose. And just dropping the bead, flat side down, right in the middle of the crazy glue. That's simple. Now I'm going to pull out a couple of the more cylindrical ones to use as hinges on the door. Okay. Same thing. Decide I want the hinge there, let's say. Grab my bead, just drop it in place. And then what I can even do is use my clippers or my hobby knife to just kind of move it a bit. I don't want to use my fingers because the majority of the time it will stick to your finger rather than the terrain piece. But if I just use this just to straighten it up so it looks like it's at least somewhat straight. I mean, yes, this was built by orcs, but come on, it's got to be able to function. And then you can even just put a little dab between the popsicle stick and the bead just to strengthen it a bit, fill in the little crack there. So I'm going to put the second one down here in this vicinity. Drop my bead in place. I just positioned it with my finger, even though I told you not to. Trust me, it's much easier if you use a knife or the sharp end of your clippers. So there you go. There's the door. Super simple. Now for the rivets, I've decided to use these super tiny beads. I wasn't really sure what I was going to use as rivets when I first started making these terrain pieces, but then I got a crap load of beads off my wife's grandmother, so I might as well use them, right? The whole point is you can make terrain out of things you just find around the house, and these beads are very easy to pick up at most craft stores if you don't have them. So basically all I'm doing is basically what I did with the doorknob. I'm just going to go around, and anywhere I think there should be a rivet, I'm going to put a dab of crazy glue. So I'm going to put my first one there. Now because these ones are so tiny, I have to be real careful as to get the actual flat side with the hole in it down, like that. So that the hole is against the ground. Sometimes they will land sideways, in which case you just take your knife or you take the end of your clippers and straighten it out. So there you go. It fell on its side. I'm just going to take my clippers and flip her over. There you go. And then just push it into the place I want it. Bam. That easy. So I'm just going to go crazy and put rivets all over this thing.
That boy is out of his mind. Well, if that's true, I'm telling you, at least I have a good time. Here we go.
That only took a little bit, but we got all the rivets on all the armor plates. Without that detail, it would really just look like corrugated cardboard, and just adding that alone just made a massive difference to the overall appearance of the piece. So we're not quite done yet. We've just got one more step as far as the construction of the actual building is concerned. So I'm just going to cap it off by literally capping it off. So I got all this exposed foam core all the way around the outside, and I actually want these buildings to look like metal. I don't want them to look like usually I use foam core for concrete or, you know, various other uses, but it has a texture, especially on the edges, and I am debating whether I'm going to paint them silver or spray paint them silver. Either way, I want to cover up the foam core, especially if I'm spray painting, because it will melt the foam center. It won't hurt the Bristol board shell, but it'll melt the foam center. Anyway, long story short, all I'm doing is just like we did on the sides here, basically, is I'm going to line the top with popsicle sticks. So my building, of course, is longer than one popsicle stick, so to start off, I'm just going to cut 2 at full length, just trimming off the circular edges, as always, because, you know, wooden planks don't have circular edges. And just like before, I'm just going to clean up the tip. I'm going to run it down the edge and whittle off little bits here and there, just to make them look damaged and worn.
Well, he doesn't want to notice, but the line seems long.
All I gotta do is run a bead along the top where I intend to put the stick. I want to run it on the foam core. Now I've got this on the low temperature setting to not melt it as much. And basically just put it flush with the side beams that I put on, and just try and run it as straight as possible. If I want, I can even try and eye it up so that it's flush with my armor plates that I put on the front, especially these ones that come like 2 plates out. I want to kind of cover the top of it so that when you're looking down at it, it doesn't really look like corrugated cardboard from the side. I mean, obviously we can't avoid it 100%, but we can avoid most of it. Anyway, I'm going to put some glue on the other side. Again. Like so. There you go. So the rest of it is pretty straightforward actually, because again, orcs built this thing, so they don't have to be 100% precise. So all I'm going to do is trim my circular end off. I'm just going to grab a pencil here, put my flat end against that one, and literally mark off with the pencil where the other one is. And again, if you're, a millimeter off, a couple millimeters off, no big deal. Trim it with my clippers, and just like before, trim the ends and whittle off some battle damage. So I'm going to go around the rest of this roof. Same thing. What I'm going to do over here is basically that. I'm going to butt the end up against it, draw a pencil line, and then chop it so that it's the remaining length, and then cut my middle one the same way I cut this one. So you guys can just watch me go at it, I guess. That's our orc house. I mean, that's the most basic orc house you can get. Just some simple techniques you can use to make it look awesome with very simple materials. Obviously, I've built a whole bunch more of these off camera, some more intricate than this. There's just a few more touches I want to add to this before we can have them all ready for painting. I've just got here some chunks of sprue and those pieces of flash that come on the bottom of resin models, like the under the base. For some reason there's a piece of a drop pod wing in there. Awesome. Should throw those in with the vehicle bits there. So that's the other thing I have. A container here just full of random bits. Tires, tracks, engine parts, whatever it may be. Random vehicle type bits. And I'm calling this Skraptown, so I want it to look like a scrapyard. So everywhere around all the buildings, all the terrain pieces I'm going to be building for this, I'm going to just put random piles of scrap. And for that, I'm going to use all these pieces of sprue that would otherwise be useless, these big chunks of crap that you get on the bottom of your resin models, and literally just take my clippers and haphazardly just cut them into little pieces. Just going to go all around, like large pieces, but like not obviously so large that they're unmanageable, but something that looks like it could be a pile of junk. And literally, like I said, this is the kind of materials that you really have no other use for, so we might as well use it, right? Because it's going to create a nice effect in the finished project. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes and chop all these up.
Probably let it go.
That's more than a good enough pile of scrap, because I'm doing this piece and I've got a few more others to do after this. So I'm also going to look through here for any bits that I think might be useful. It might just be cool to have hanging around. So I don't want to use too many of these tires because I actually want to use those in a future conversion, but I do have like some like this where it's just half a tire. So I can use that, because I have no use for it if it's only half. Not much of a use for it anyway. And, oh cool, there's a dead Tau head. I like that. Yeah. There you go, one of those Imperial satellite dish things. 2 track pieces, that might be fun. Imperial Guard track, or actually that's Rhino track. Cool, so I've got a couple bits in there too. And all I'm going to do is go around the piece, and anywhere I think I want a little mound of trash, like right there, let's say, I'm just going to put a big glob of glue, grab a pinch of this random pile of crap, just sprinkle them on top, Obviously I need to get a couple of smaller ones into there. Cool. Now I'm just using PVA glue for this, guys. Obviously I'm using all kinds of materials for this pile of trash, but that's why I put a massive glob of the glue on there. So even though, you know, it may not itself adhere to the various materials, to the resin, the plastic, the metal, whatever else I've thrown in here, because I've got some pewter in here, I've got 2 different types of resin, I have, you know, your normal gray plastic. Even if it doesn't adhere to the material itself, at least they'll be somewhat buried in it, and that way they'll stay in place once it dries. Plus, we are going to be throwing sand on this piece, obviously, as we always do after we put these pieces on. So, right now, I'm just trying to create large pieces of rubble. The sand and the gravel will do the rest.
Everything's a box inside a box inside a box.
Cool. So I think that's enough for that piece. I'm going to save these for the others. And yeah, we'll check back with you once that's done. There it is, Skraptown. Awesome. So that was quite a bit of work, but as you can see, it clearly paid off. So, obviously I only showed you guys this one on camera. You've seen it from start to finish. That is the basic building. Obviously I have expanded it a bit and done some different things with a few of them. This one pretty much the same actually as the one that you guys saw. This one basically the same, but on the front here I've actually put the door on the short side rather than on the long side, and I've put one of those city fight things, a track guard here, something cool like that. But even more fun, in the back I decided to blow a hole out of the building, and then I realized that it was going to be really hard to paint inside, so I've basically plugged the hole with an orc firing his shooter from the inside there, and a little snotling that I got off one of the Warhammer Fantasy sprues back in the day. So that's a fun little twist to it. This guy over here, I added this little like side platform. Basically I just like with a random cutoff that I had from cutting these, supported it with a couple of random cutoffs again, and then of course lined it with the corrugated cardboard and popsicle sticks the same way I did the rest of the buildings, so nothing super complicated there. And then this one I actually decided to get really creative, and I've got myself an Arizona can there. I just added the corrugated cardboard the same way I did on the buildings so it will look the same, and just to make it not look so much like a pop can, I built this little platform for the top of it, so I got kind of like a crow's nest situation going on there, which is pretty cool. The building otherwise is just like all the others. This one is just a platform I made out of popsicle sticks, very simple. Just lined them all up with a couple running across the bottom, glued it on the top, and then just cut random pieces of popsicle sticks all over the place just to create a little wall for said crow's nest. And then this little thing at the front, I just had all these little pieces left over from cutting up for all the little piles of scrap that are around the buildings. I had a whole bunch of extra pieces, obviously random pieces of foam core, pieces of popsicle sticks from that and from all the other ones, right? So I just sort of put a bunch of glue down, hot glue, white glue, all kinds of stuff, just threw a whole bunch of stuff on top, and it just made this weird little barricade. Wasn't part of the plan, but a good use of the cutoff and extra materials. So that is Skraptown. That is the start of it. So I hope you all enjoyed that tutorial. I had a lot of fun making these buildings. So join me next week where I'll show you guys how to paint them, how I'm going to paint them at least, to match my orc army, but also lead them into future pieces for this table. I really wanted to build a table just for myself, just to satisfy my own terrain needs. I've always wanted to build an orc village, and this gave me the opportunity to do that. Orcs being my main army, I thought it would be great if my own home table was an orc village to match my army. So there it is. So join me next week where I'll paint all these buildings up, and I'll show you guys some very simple ways you can do that without a whole lot of work. Yeah. And then in the future we're going to be building a whole bunch more orc terrain pieces because I want to populate a 6x4 with orc pieces. If you like this video, if you want to see more of it, hit subscribe, hit that bell notification, and then you will be notified when these videos come out so that you don't miss a thing. Also, if you really like these videos and you want to give back to what we do here at Encounter Wargaming, please check out the description below. There is a link to our Patreon campaign where for as little as $1 a video, so these videos you're already getting for free, you get extra video content, behind the scenes video content. We give you these videos, like I say, that you're now getting for free. You'll get them a few days early because you were so gracious to pay for them. But also, we're now able to offer you a 10% discount off the warpainter.com, so you can get all your Vallejo, your Scale 75, your brush cleaner, all that stuff on their website, mailed to your door. And if you are a patron of ours, you get 10% off, which is pretty damn sweet. So check out the Patreon link, and we'll see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on its way back home. Okay.